Welcome to the Sober Nation FM podcast, where we're putting recovery on the map. I'm your host, Jonathan Sylvester. This show is brought to you by Sobriety Engine. Do you want to take your recovery to the next level? Do you want more support, community, and fellowship? Sobriety Engine is an incredible free online community of men and women supporting each other in their recovery. You can get a ton of great tips, resources, and guidance to help you succeed in recovery and in life. Visit sobrietyengine.com to join today. Sober Nation FM is also brought to you by Recover Health. If you're ready to get fit and start living a healthier lifestyle, all while supporting your sobriety, then you can learn more about having me as your own personal fitness and nutrition coach at rcvrhealth.com. And whether you're listening to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or watching on YouTube, please share this with your friends. Follow, subscribe, and leave a review. Nation, let's hop right into today's episode. Today, I'll be speaking with celebrity agent, best-selling author, and public speaker, Darren Prince. Thanks for joining me, Darren.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me.
So I want to hear all about, how you get to work with so many big celebrities, your best-selling book, Aiming High. But first off, I want to hear a little bit about what it was like before you got sober. So what was actually going on?
What was going on, because there's always a backline to every good addict and alcoholic story, was I always had a lot of anxiety as a kid. I never felt comfortable in my own skin. I had friends, boys and girlfriends, and from the outside, it seemed like everything was all good, but I always suffered from this imposter syndrome. And, always a nervous stomach, upset stomach. I'd be the type of kid that would get homesick if I was away too long. And in school, I always felt less than. I was classified as having a severe learning disability and put in special ed classrooms. And even at those, I failed most of them. I did terrible. And then when I eventually wound up experimenting my first time with drugs, I found a solution for all of it to finally fit in.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That sounds a lot like me, man. And I know also that a big part of your story is baseball cards and getting into card collecting. And man, that was like my thing for years. So
I love when that comes up, man.
yeah. So
And I cannot even tell you how many interviews I've done with some of the biggest hosts, and the baseball card comes up almost more than the sports and entertainment agency, and more than the recovery, because
yeah,
like
man.
most
No,
men understand what it's like.
absolutely. Yeah. No, I had a lot of love for that, man. That was definitely like my first big hobby. You said you just didn't really feel comfortable with yourself. And I'm kind of thinking back, I've never really thought about like the collecting and a hobby like that. But that's a hobby you do. I guess you would maybe meet up with buddies or something like that, but you kind of do by yourself. Do you feel like you isolated a bit like into that? Did that give you an excuse to kind of like escape and do your own thing? Do you think, the card collecting?
100%. That's what cards were to me, because
Okay.
I wrote about this in my book, Aiming High. I mean, there was times, I remember this girl, Tara, who might have been 14, 15 years old, was the first girl that actually showed that she liked me. And
Okay.
she was calling with some friends at like a house party. Everybody was drinking wine coolers and stuff. And I already did my first baseball card show a few months earlier. So I immersed myself into that. I finally found purpose. I was, as my father used to say, a mathematical and statistical genius. And that was the one thing that made me feel really good about myself. And I'd be making a couple $1,000s in a Sunday afternoon at a baseball card convention, buying, selling, trading. And my friends would always want me to come by and party with them. And I had no interest. It just wasn't for me. And she left a voicemail to this day I will never forget. She goes, "Darren, it's Tara. Come here and hang out. You're such a cutie. Stop playing with your stupid baseball cards." I didn't, and I didn't even, whatever. I didn't care, because I wound up immersed into my own world, and like the cards were like my friends. I got attached to them. It was a deep emotional attachment. There was a sense of purpose, because I learned how to monetize it into a business, and then I slowly started developing confidence, because when I was at these shows, unlike in school, a lot of the other collectors and the dealers started looking at me as this young hotshot authority in the industry.
Wow.
So why would I want to be with anybody else?
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. Well, and again, like, I haven't thought about the card collecting stuff that much in just relation to, I guess, my addiction, but I can definitely see how there was some like addictive tendencies going on. You know, I mean, I can just remember like ripping open, you know, some of those card packs and like getting that
Yep.
rush, you know, just hoping I
Yep.
get that rare autograph card or
Exactly.
whatever. So yeah,
And
so
my generation was different. We had the best gum back then in the
yeah,
80s. So
there
you
you
would
go.
buy it for the gum, and then you would hope to get,
Yeah,
whether
like the
it's Don
Topps
Mattingly,
packs and
Roger
stuff.
Clemens, Darryl Strawberry. We didn't have those autograph or those relic cards, but we had cards that were extremely valuable.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when did the using and drinking and all of that, when did that actually start? Like how old were you?
At 14 years old, I was
Okay,
in
it was at
sleep.
14.
I was in sleepaway camp and had terrible stomach pains one night, and I asked the counselor to take me to see the nurse, and she gave me a green liquid that was in a cough syrup cup, little shot cup, and it tasted horrible. But within 2-3 minutes, my life changed forever. When I was walking across the softball field, and I just felt like I finally found myself. I
Mm.
felt like so excited that like, oh, but this buzz just came over me. And I got back to the bunk. I was the cool guy, the talkative one. I was able to flirt with the girls in the bunk next door for the first time. And again, I really didn't think anything of it. I just loved the feeling and I needed more of it. And the next day I did all my activities and I'm lying in bed that night with no stomach pains. And I learned to lie and cheat and do whatever I had to do in that very moment. I look at the counter and I fall over. And I said, "Oh man, we got to go back to the infirmary. My stomach, man, it's killing me." I did this for a few weeks until my mom and dad came up on visitation day. And mom found out they were giving me a low dose of liquid Demerol.
Oh, wow. Wow. For a stomach ache. Okay.
Yep, yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah, so you kind of ran with that first cup, did it? That first little
That
swig of
first, that first cup, I chased that feeling for 24 years of my life
wow.
till I was
So
38.
yeah, so you build this business where you're making good money trading cards. How does this turn into representing people? Well, so I think as I read it, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you had gotten into the collecting scene a little bit. Like you said, you were a hot shot. And then I think you kind of linked up with some celebs to do like autograph.
Memorabilia signings.
So, yeah,
Yep,
memorabilia signings. Okay.
yep.
And so how did all this evolve over the years? I mean, what was going on and how did it relate to your addiction? Like how was
So,
your addiction progressing in all this?
so basically, after I had an experience with the dentist 6 months after sleepaway camp with Vicodins, and I abused the Vicodins and lied to my mom that the wisdom tooth pain was still there. For the next 5 or 6 years, man, I really was. I was like Teflon and untouchable. And I faded to the hill. I mean, talk shows, Daily News, New York Post, USA Today. I'd walk into a convention like I am my clients are today when I'm out with them. It
Hmm.
was such a massive boom. We had Wayne Gretzky that bought the most expensive Honus Wagner car known to existence. There were celebrities, there were big corporate CEOs. The boom was just like nothing I've ever seen in the 80s, which is why the hobby's so hot now.
Yeah.
And I was like a young OG,
Hmm.
and all I wanted to do was just party. And I was making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year as a teenager. And eventually it all, I guess, as you say, all the shit hit the fan. When I was 21, I was arrested 4 times in a matter of 6 months, different possession charge, obviously not for distribution for myself and for my friends' use. And I was put in a program called the Alliance for a year by the judge, had my license taken away, told me if I was arrested one more time, I'd be looking at a minimum of 6 months in prison because clearly I've got an issue that I don't notice. And I came out, and a few days early, I supposedly graduated the program, as we're not supposed to say ever in recovery because there's no graduation. And
Right.
that night, I went out with my friend Dave and got banged up. We did these mind eraser shots and took a handful of Xanax, and our minds were erased because next thing I know, he fell asleep behind the wheel. His car went into a ditch. My face went into the windshield, 90 stitches, broken nose, cut lip, concussion, and I wake up in the hospital in the ICU, and the first two people I see are my mom and my dad with tears running down their face. Here, I just completed this program, and it didn't even take me 2 days until I'm even worse than I was almost a year earlier, because that's what addiction does,
Yeah.
destroys families. And I had everything going for me.
Mm.
So, I was the high bottom because I had the money, I had the life at that point, the woman. Um, I had everything I ever freaking needed, but I didn't have myself. And so I was dabbling in the sports and entertainment memorabilia business at that time because I love the sexiness of it. I love the coolness that you could be with these, huge superstars and get to chill with them in a private hotel room, and they sign a bunch of autographs. We had a whole distribution outlet set up with different dealers, and back then there was no internet, so there was a magazine called Sports Collectors Digest and Tough Stuff, and I'd spend thousands of dollars a week advertising the merchandise to collectors. And through that business, I developed a lot of relationships that eventually would start Prince Marketing Group. Once I sold that old company, which was now Prince Marketing Group, and Magic Johnson became my first client. And I learned to negotiate the same way with memorabilia deals out in the real world, with much more substantial deals. My dad was a tremendously impactful individual in my life. He taught me, just real business, as they say, from the Marty Prince University. I never really needed college because that didn't go too good for me. I went 1 year to University of Bridgeport, and I dropped out with a 0.89 GPA. And partied my ass up,
Wow.
the women, everything else that came along with it at the time of my life. But I don't even know how many times I went to class. And then again, like, I laugh about these things, and I realize that so much of that is about brokenness. So much of that is about finding a sense of self. I got guy friends right now that could still be that way with women. I'm like, that's not what life's about, man. You gotta love yourself from the inside. People that are out there drinking during this pandemic, going crazy, isolating, and just that negative space. And I can laugh about it now because I'm in such a beautiful space in my life. But that Darren Prince was really insecure, man. He was really, really broken. He really felt like a total piece of shit, and wanted the whole world to think otherwise. He had that imposter syndrome,
Yeah, no, I get that 100%, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners can relate to that as well. And you're touching on a little bit just like this internal conversation that goes on. So again, like, here you are, like, everything on the outside, well, up until a certain point when you're getting arrested and getting in car wrecks and stuff, looks pretty good. I mean, even before that, even before the arrests and stuff like that, was there some kind of internal conversation or conflict going on, like, hey, this is starting to become a problem?
It took me into my early 30s. I just, for some reason, never registered, and I got in more legal trouble. I talk about it in my book. In the memorabilia business, I was investigated by the FBI and not charged with mail fraud, but I made a stupid business mistake trusting somebody. And even after that, I just, once I started Prince Marketing Group, I just said to myself, okay, no more of the illegal drugs. And you're signing morality clauses. You got to be smart here with your clients. And because I had sciatica and anxiety, I gravitated more towards the opiates. And doctors would write me prescriptions all day long for oxys, Percocets, and Vicodins. And those were my closest friends in the world for the next, whatever it was, 10, 12, 13 years, until they turned on me. And I always say, I was once living to use turned out to using to live. And I cannot tell you that day. I had an overdose in Las Vegas during NBA All-Star Weekend in 2007. I was out there with Dennis Rodman. Clear the record right now. He's never done a drug in his life. Dennis's drug of choice is alcohol, but I wasn't with him that morning. I woke up and we were there to celebrate a big television show deal. I negotiated with Steve Simon in my office with Mark Cuban for his TV network. And HDNet was supposed to be super exciting. I had a horrible case of bronchitis and called the doctor to the room to get what I really loved more than anything, heaven in a bottle, Tussin X cough syrup. And it was pineapple juice that would just get you lit friggin' up. Very heavily opiate based cough syrup. And it was just unbelievable. So here I am, actually happy that I was running a fever, coughing up my lung, and had bronchitis, because then it was a perfect excuse. So as I'm coming back from the pharmacy, I had 100 Vicodins that he called in, a huge bottle of Tussin X and some antibiotic. I called my then wife. I said, call me room service, and order me 3 vodka, Red Bull, and cranberries, because I'm going to get ready to go out to this event. And came back, I chugged half the bottle. I chopped up 3 Vicodins. I snorted them in the bathroom, and just a couple drinks went down, and I'm on the ground, shaking, trembling, and crying, having no idea what's going on, in and out of consciousness, foaming at the mouth. My heart's palpitating. I'm freezing. I'm burning hot, praying to God, looking up at the sky, saying, don't take me. I don't know what the hell I just did. I'll never do this again. And paramedics came, oxygen mask on my face, EKG machine, needles in my arms as I'm looking up at the sky, just shaking. And, I made it. clearly, and never made it out that night. I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning to look at myself in the mirror, and bags under my eyes, bloodshot. I looked like complete death. And I was like, "You sick bastard. Like who does this? You've got all this going on. Who does this?" And the only thing I knew to do is to get high. And I finished the rest of the Tussie, and I snorted a few more Vicodins and went back to bed, because in that moment, it was the vodka, Red Bull, and cranberry that caused the combination. You talk about in the fellowship, the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. That was it right there. But if there was a moment, that was the moment. That was the moment of change. We can get there next, because that's when the miracle happened.
Yeah, so I definitely want to get into that. I think we've talked about the problem plenty and what was going on. So you overdose. Thankfully, you pull through. Where do things develop from there? Like, how does the recovery actually start?
So July 1st, 2008, my uncle and his then girlfriend are both in the fellowship, were visiting my mom in New Jersey, and he's from Miami. He's been out of the rooms for a long time, putting 15 years together, going back out, 10 years going back out, but still had somewhat of a decent foundation. I think at this point he was back in the rooms for 5 or 6 years, and they paid me a surprise visit. I was at my wit's end. I didn't want to wake up anymore. I just did not want to live. And I had all the money, all the stuff, a beautiful wife, and great house and the cars, and revered in my industry. But I was living a double life. Nobody giving it all away to get that sense of inner peace that I probably didn't have since I was a little kid. And that was one of those God moments, because they paid me a surprise visit, and she looked at me and she's like, "Are you okay?" I said, "No." I told her everything. I never met her before, but there was
Wow.
some magical connection between her and I that I felt the need right then to tell her what was going on. And she's like, "Do you know I'm in recovery?" I was like, "No, I don't." She goes, "That's how me and your uncle met, coming up on 5 years sober." She goes, "Do you realize you're an addict, that your life's unmanageable?" I said, "Yes." She goes, "Do you realize that you're powerless over substances?" I said, "Yeah, for sure." And she goes, "Most importantly, do you realize that addiction does not discriminate? It doesn't matter if you're from Yale or jail or Park Avenue, Park Bench, because of all the stuff you accomplished out there means bullshit, you know?" And I was like, "I get it." She goes, "Most importantly, do you want help?" I said, "I'm desperate, please." And she's like, "I can help you." At that point, I was on Suboxone, an antidepressant, a mood stabilizer, anxiety pill, sniffing Ambien before I went to bed tonight, and probably drinking a couple days a week to the point of blackout when I was out with my friends or clients. And she put me on a detox plan on that 48th hour, man. I wouldn't suggest this for anybody, but God really came into my life, because I should have been in a treatment center, but my ego wouldn't let me. I was too big. I was too busy. And it was July 2nd, 2008. About 7 o'clock in the evening, I was living in New York with my then wife. I came back from the gym. I'm shaking. I'm miserable, diarrhea all day and vomiting. And I said, "I can't do this anymore." I said, "I'm calling them up. I got to get what I really want to get." And as they're yelling at me on the other line, "You got to go to a 12-step meeting. You need to put your hands up already and surrender and tell these people you're sick, you're suffering, and you need help." And I said, "There's no freaking way I've been to those meetings. I can't identify with those people." And I hung up the phone and I ran into the bathroom of my apartment. And I went to take 2 non-narcotic anxiety pills to help with the cravings, and out came 2 Vicodins, which was bizarre, because we knew we cleared out every medicine cabinet in the
Wow.
house of all the opiates.
Yeah.
We said 100% we triple checked it. How in the world were there 2 Vicodins in this one bottle? And it felt like a gift from God. It was like a sense of relief, like exactly what I needed. And but then that moment happened, because I hit my knees for the first time in my life, and the tears came out, flowing down my face. And I remember calling out almost the same way Bill W. had it in the hospital that night in 1930, 34. You know, as he said, "If there's a God out there, show yourself." I said, "God, I can't do this anymore." Screaming, I said, I'll do anything. Help take the chains off me, please. I'm so sick and tired of this life." And then it happened, because there's a burning sensation as I'm on my knees on my right shoulder. And this voice just was in my head telling me, I've got you when you're ready. And I stood up and I flushed the pills.
Wow.
And I went up in the living room. 3 minutes later, there was no Uber. I go right to AA New York City near me. I found one in the upper 80s and I jump in the taxi and I'm looking up at the sky saying, holy shit, what the heck just happened? For the first time in my life, I wanted to stay sober more than I wanted to get high.
Wow.
And I walked into a church basement with about 150 to 200 addicts and alcoholics, all once of a hopeless state of mind. And I threw my hand right up. There was no ego. This wasn't Darren Prince, the so-called big shot super agent that couldn't stay sober for more, than an hour or two in his life. This was life, and about being accountable. And man, it was just amazing because 10 to 12 spiritual brothers and sisters came right over to me in the beginning of that meeting. They put their arms around me, they gave me their number. We know what you're feeling. We've been where you've been. Stick with the winners. Take the cotton out of your ears, put it in your mouth. This is the first day for a brand new life. And they showed me how to love Darren Prince one day at a time before I ever, knew how to love myself. And that was incredible because I couldn't understand that until I started putting time together. And then my life really changed when I started doing the reverse commute to New Jersey, which was right away, and immersed myself in the New Jersey program and in Essex Fells and West Orange. And I met my sponsor. I heard him share one time, and I heard the importance of sponsorship. And maybe I had 30 days, and I went right over to him after a meeting. And we speak 4 or 5 times a day back then because I needed it. And he would thank me every time after every call and tell me, you're helping me more than I'll ever help you. Couldn't understand it. I was like, makes no sense. I'm driving this guy freaking crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now we understand it. And, it just one day at a time became a week, became a month, became a year. And eventually at some point, I'd say probably 4 years in, 5 years in, I started getting very vocal about it on social media because, I have a following and obviously my name in the sports and entertainment industry. And, I've been to Dr. Bob's and took a tour there and they told me that Bill actually struggled in the early 70s before he passed with the anonymous part. He thought that the anonymous part's going to have to go out the window at some point for people of the masses to know that there is a solution. And if Darren Prince, God forbid, relapsed tomorrow, in the 12 years almost I've been sober, and 70 speaking engagements, tens of thousands of people in the rooms, phone calls, random messages. You're going to tell me there's not one person that's still sober in this 12 years? You better believe there's at least one. So this shit works. This fellowship works. Okay. I don't think it's for everybody. I think there's some people that can get sober and be dry. That's on them, or they can find meditation, and that's great. Whatever it is, as long as your life is not unmanageable, as long as you're a productive member of society, again, you're not lying, you're not cheating, you're not stealing, you're living a better quality life. Whatever it is, I'm all for it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, same here, man. And I'm a product of the 12 steps and, had a very similar experience to what you just described. And I remember I've talked about this a few times on the show that, yeah, I think you're a really great example of this, Darren, that just what unmanageability really means, because so many times we think, well, and we hear it, it's maybe even someone that was doing really well, making tons of money, had the beautiful wife, huge house, all this stuff. And that, a lot of the times we hear they lose it all, right? And clearly that looks unmanageable. But I think your experience and what was pointed out to me is the unmanageability. It's not just about losing all the money and all the material stuff and all that. It's really about, what's going on when I look in the mirror. Like, how do I feel?
Yep.
How do I feel about Jonathan? It's not what's in my bank account, or maybe the relationships that I'm destroying or any of that. Because some people can, hold that stuff together to a degree, and I think that's important to mention. So let me ask you, I mean, it sounds like you did kind of what I did. Like, you just jumped right into this deal, and sounds like you probably got involved and took the suggestion, so to speak. But what were some of your bigger struggles early on in sobriety? What would you say?
Early on, I was having some marital issues because, I started finally finding out who the real me was, which was
Okay.
tough. So obviously relationship issues.
Yeah.
Um, I was gambling a lot, man, a
Hmm.
lot. I don't mind talking about it. My sponsor said you're switching seats in the Titanic, so we better talk, man, if this keeps going. Um, Business was still amazing. I was blowing a lot of freaking money going to Atlantic City or Vegas. It was 2 hours from my house to escape. So even though I wasn't putting a drink or a drug in my system, I don't need to be batshit crazy doing that. I'm very well capable to this day of being out of my effing mind if I let myself without putting a single substance in my body.
Hmm.
Okay, and people need to understand. I don't care how much time you have. That's why truly it's one day at a time. So I nipped that in the bud. Then I think eventually my perspective and perception started changing on so much in life. I started really working through the steps. I started realizing where a lot of the behavioral pattern came, like I said, whether I got something in my system or not. And I became the most psychotic, relentless, obsessive meeting maker in the world that this fellowship has ever seen. I don't say it in an arrogant way. I say it not to impress people, but to impress upon. I've been to meetings in the past 12 years in Guialas, Sydney, Australia, Tokyo, Japan, London, England, Tahiti. I found them in Puerto Rico, Maui, Honolulu, beach meetings. I mean, because I needed that. I needed that connection with all the traveling I do. And it is the greatest freaking high in the world. And I remember my sponsor saying, you would put in all that effort to go to a strip club to
Hmm.
party your ass off because you got to put the same goddamn effort into your freaking recovery. And when I got that, man, it's the greatest thing in the freaking world to go on the road and go to meetings, especially in other countries. Magic Johnson and Cookie, his wife, had a 60th birthday celebration. I was honored to be invited to in Saint Tropez last August. And man, I mean, I found a meeting in Nice. I found one right outside of Saint Tropez. I found one in Monaco. Freaking amazing to walk into a freaking room and
Yeah, that's
25
awesome.
people there. Some are American, some aren't, and freaking feel like you're right at home, even though you're not home. And so I got that right down right away. But I've struggled with women. I still have over, coming up on 12 years sober. I've got my buddy John Alvino, who's a renowned NLP technician, what kind of Tony Robbins does, and we've had some amazing breakthroughs over the past year because I think that was, my last relationship with my ex fiance, who I'll always love. We had a tremendous relationship, and I checked out and it's completely on me. She did nothing wrong, and I said I want to be that person anymore. The next woman I find, I want to be the best version that I can be for Darren Prince. And I work on that every day with somebody that's in my life where I got to sometimes take myself out of myself and understand the root of the problem and why certain character flaws came into play. And a lot of them are back as a teenager. We had some tremendous breakthroughs on 4 deep NLP sessions. And I was hurt tremendously 16, 17, 19, and 20 by 4 different girls. And the first time I went all in with women and never addressed it. So for all you players out there that are listening, that's where that shit comes from. Because I ran with the best of them, and I thought I was cool, and that's not what it is. You're escaping. That's what you're freaking doing. Anybody that's in recovery right now, living that life, I'm telling you, I thought I was the coolest guy in the world. Every guy wanted to be with me. Every guy wanted to freaking hang out. It was about all the women and the excitement in the life. Nah, that's because we don't feel fulfilled. That's because we haven't found the right one that brings us up.
Hmm.
You know, and not saying my last one wasn't the right one. It was the wrong time because I wasn't the right Darren Prince.
Sure.
And I'm accountable for stuff like that now.
Yeah.
Recovery is not just about putting drink or drug in your system. It's a thinking issue. It's a thinking disease that we have. So you're always evolving. You're always improving. You're always getting better, you know?
Well, yeah, no, and I love that, man. I think that's so important. Again, one of the things it was pointed out. I mean, and this was more specifically in a recovery sense, like, and it was said in a lot of different ways. If you're not growing, you're dying, or if you're not working on your recovery, you're working on your relapse. But I've come to see that just in life as well, that for me, I have to continue to grow, and it's about, and I'm not always great about it, but it's supposed to be
Yeah.
about continual improvement. you're mentioning some things like NLP, neuro linguistic programming, and some other stuff. Do you think that people should, maybe after they kind of get a foundation in recovery, whatever they're doing, whether it's a 12-step program or just meditation or whatever it is, they've been sober for a little while. Do you think that they should start to look into some of these other things maybe to improve their lives, or what do you think?
A million percent. I mean, I
Okay.
couldn't just do it with the 12-step program.
Okay.
I'm very blessed in my industry, obviously, to know some of the biggest world changers: Tony Robbins, Jay Shetty, who's the best in the world right now. Jay, and I love him. He's freaking a game changer. You go on Instagram every day, instead of looking at your friends' photos, follow Jay Shetty.
Yeah.
Joel Osteen's a dear friend. Gary Vaynerchuk, Lewis Howes. They man, just to be around them, and they love my way of life, which is even cooler in a way. Like, they just love the 12-step work. And I'm on a magazine cover that was just announced yesterday. It's coming out in a few weeks. I don't know if you follow me on social, but
Yeah, I do.
they posted it everywhere. Yes, I think it's called the Ink Industry or Tattoo Magazine. And I mean, Jay Shetty freaking saw it and did his own, post on it. And, Roy Jones Jr. sends me a text: "Congrats, man." He goes, "I just posted your cover to 500,000 people." It's not an ego thing. No, that's the difference. The difference is I know that people are going to read about my journey, my Aiming High Foundation, and how important it is for me to raise awareness and funds to give people treatment. My affiliation with Banyan Treatment Center, where I have my own toll-free call number to get people scholarship if they need it.
Wow. That's
My book,
awesome.
Aiming High, which I wrote a tell-all about the hell of addiction through the beauty of spiritual recovery, while representing some of the most iconic figures of our time. Again, none of it is ego-driven. This is all pure. This is the real Darren Prince that wants to push this message out there to the masses, always being respectful of AA. I
Yeah.
never mention AA. I always talk about a 12-step fellowship. And there's so much more out there to gravitate to than the 12-step fellowship. I mean, it gave me a life to keep getting to those next levels. Those other guys, man, they're game changers. I mean, the first day I did my book tour for Aiming High, my publicist had me on Good Day New York, and Joel Osteen was always one of my favorites, not from a religious standpoint, because I was raised Jewish, but the spiritual messages are just, they're
Yeah, he's a
very
great
12-step.
speaker. I mean, you can't
Yeah, and
deny
he's one
that.
of the greatest speakers ever. And
Yeah.
God managed coincidences. I call them GMCs. The same morning I'm on Good Day New York, Joel Osteen was there 5 minutes before. And he was one of my favorites long before my book came out. And we got to spend time with each other, and I exchanged info with his team and his handlers. And I've sat in the front row with him in Victoria Lakewood Church. I've been in his office before a service. I took Hulk Hogan there to reconnect them. I mean, it's what a freaking blessing. And for him to look at me with Victoria and take photos with my book, and they started reading it and says, "Thank you for your testimony, Darren, and we were given to the world." Oof, that's
That's
deep.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Well, and so you're talking about obviously being around these different celebrities, and and the book Aiming High, and one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is, I think the first time that I saw you on TV, you were with Dennis Rodman. And I think that this was a clip where I think he was, and not trying to get into anyone else's sobriety or anything like
Oh,
that,
that's okay.
but I think he was trying to get his stuff together, kind of just getting his stuff together.
Was it Tucker Carlson, Fox and Friends?
I think so. It was just a clip that I saw online,
Okay.
actually. And anyway, so have there been other opportunities where people are kind of seeing like what you're talking about, and just you talking about this addiction stuff, and seeing you with Dennis talking about his struggles and trying to get him on track? I mean, have you had other people reach out to you that are kind of saying, like, maybe hinting at the fact that they're struggling a little bit as well? And again, not to bust anyone's anonymity, but I would just imagine that people are seeing this, people that might not know where to reach out, and they're like, "Hey, so how do you find one of those meetings, or how do I
Yeah.
find treatment?" Or
Yeah. No, I'd say that's one of the privileges too. Obviously, without mentioning some names, I mean, some
sure,
very, very powerful corporate executives, very wealthy. Um, you know, uh, definitely some celebrities, other ones that have struggled because I'm so open about it. I'm so comfortable talking about the uncomfortable now.
Yeah.
But to me, it doesn't matter if they're a celebrity and everyday earth people. You know, it's I'll help anybody. I'll put the same amount of time into if it's an A-list freaking actor or actress or sports superstar as I will with your everyday freaking man or woman. You know, because we're all looking for the same common goal. Nobody's
Mhm.
better than anybody else at that point. As is recovery. If you got 10 years and I got 12 years, we got the moment of right now, man. Nobody's I've listened to people with 40 years in the same meeting that I've run from what they have, and I've got somebody there sharing with 3 days and they gave me what I need.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah, for sure.
there's just no way that there's no rhyme or reason. But that's also why I just make sure I've used all my resources to get on the biggest and the best talk shows, the best podcasts. I know how revered you guys are in this world. I've Jordan Herberger, I've done his. I'll probably have spoke to Jay's guy. They're going to schedule something with me, and whatever I got to do to just keep showing others that are out there struggling that can't come forward yet. To look at this guy Darren Prince and say, man, he's been through quite a lot, and he's accomplished so much. And it's also why I love speaking. Last year
Yeah.
I did 57 speaking engagements, and whether it's for high school kids, colleges, or businesses, when those lights come on in somebody's eyes in that room, when I'm done speaking, whatever it might be, to 500, 200, 3,000 people, I never know what the size is. And during that Q&A, something magical happens, and they come over to me after, and I see it in their eyes. It's a feeling you can't explain.
That's awesome.
That that's what I'm addicted to now.
That's
That's my
awesome.
addiction.
Yeah.
Brandon Novak and I doing our Instagram live now every Wednesday, where we got 4,700 people two weeks ago, because we go, no, let's open it to the masses and not make it about AA. Let's talk about the 12 steps. Let's talk about depression, anxiety, mood disorders, sadness, ups, downs, especially during the pandemic. Throw in substance abuse, obviously, because at the end of the day, the whole world can use the 12 steps. Just take alcohol out of the first one, and the other 11 have no reference whatsoever to anything related to drugs and
Mm.
alcohol.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, no, I mean, and there's tons of books, and it's talked about, I would say more prevalently, just the idea that the 12-step process is really something that can benefit anyone, and you can kind of apply it to anything, whether you have a substance abuse issue or an addiction issue or not. It's really a system to improve your
You
life.
can, it can heal, excuse me, anybody of living their best life. I mean, man, just because you get sober doesn't mean life doesn't happen. I've been through my own hell and back: divorce, broken engagement. Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier, lost them both in sobriety. I was high as a kite, as I talk about in my book, when I had the iconic dinner with both of them when they
Well,
broke
I wanted
bread.
to,
And
yeah.
you know,
So I want to ask you about that because I think you mentioned that in the book as well. I know I've seen you speak a lot about that. And for those who don't know, it's basically Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali. I mean, they were arch rivals to say the least. It's putting it really lightly. And I think you kind of played a role in a reconciliation of sorts. So I mean, what was going on in that moment? These guys come together, and then what happens?
they really didn't get in the same room alone for almost 30 years since Thriller Manila. They're the two biggest kings of the sport of the world, culturally, politically. They represented so much, and still to this day, it's the greatest rivalry in the history of sports. And my dear friend Harlan Werner was Muhammad's agent. He allowed me the opportunity to work for Muhammad and represent him as well. And he told me in the mid 90s, I got to go after Joe because there's going to be some day that we have the opportunity to bring them together, whether it's to raise awareness, money for charity, financial gain. And working on Joe for a good 6-7 years, just didn't want to do it. And Muhammad eventually started extending the olive branch, and
Hmm.
I got closer, and it wound up happening during NBA All-Star Weekend in Philadelphia, which was Joe's hometown. And literally within 4 hours of Muhammad's wife calling me, Harlan was in Vegas, he couldn't make it. Um, Joe said, okay, he goes, let's go to Muhammad's suite. And we went to downtown Philadelphia and broke bread. And what Joe didn't know was 20 minutes before we got into the elevator, I'm up in the room snorting Percocets because I just could not believe this moment that Nelson Mandela, President Clinton, A-listers, the most influential stars in the world and athletes would have been like, holy crap, I got to see this go down.
Yeah.
And the next day, the same thing. We wound up sitting center court at the NBA All-Star game. I've got, you know, Justin Timberlake State and Britney Spears, they're to the right side of the center court, and Diddy's coming over, and Jay-Z and Alicia Keys and Kobe and Michael Jordan and Magic's 4 seats to my left. And again, imposter syndrome. How the hell am I sitting here? And everybody's coming over to me and my boy Nicky C, who was with me as well. And he didn't know I was highly functioning. He's still, to this day, my boy Nick, just said, man, he goes, there was only one time at the end it seemed like you were real bad. Wow. And I really put on an amazing front. Joe never knew. But the beautiful thing about that Ali Frazier experience is when they both passed, I got to show up to both their funerals sober, present, proud, and in the moment. And I know they both would have loved that, because those were two kings of the world that, again, loved me before I ever knew how to love myself, even when I was out there. And to have a privilege and the honor of having a relationship with those men and their families meant the world to me. And I know that, like, every day when I get on my knees, and I miss my dad so much because that was another tremendous loss in recovery. It's always, I followed up with, and please let Smoke and Joe, and Muhammad know how much I miss him. Joe I was closer with because he was closer geographically, but Muhammad was and then we'll never make another like either one of those guys.
That's awesome.
And I think through all that, that's what gave me the idea to write Aiming High and hook up with my publisher, Anna David, who's the best, and she connected me with Krista McGinnis, my writer, and we were just writing a book more for therapy, and they immediately thought, after the initial intro was written, that it was going to be a bestseller, and I didn't care about any of that. I just wanted to get my message out there and do something for healing. And within a week, to find out that it became an international bestseller in 4 countries, and it still hasn't slowed down. I'm like, this is
That's awesome.
This was my purpose. Darren Prince, the agent, meant absolutely nothing. That was to get me to this point. God had a plan for me to, get right in the middle of things of the agency business, get as high to the top as I can, get me sober, and then use that platform to get this out to the masses.
Yeah.
Tell people that hope and recovery exists.
Well, so, and I do want to ask, man, I mean, I feel like it's important because really I just like to hear, people's take on this, and some people, have different thoughts on it, but especially when someone like you, who's around a bunch of celebrities, and, you're putting yourself out there, you're doing a great job of carrying the message. Do you think that the stigma and conversation around addiction is starting to change at all?
For sure. Absolutely. I mean, because everybody's affected by it. I'm being privileged to be invited to the White House 3 times in 2018, 2019, especially for Trump's historic opioid epidemic signed bill for $6 billion, which I think was the end of October of 18. I had a relationship with them years ago from Celebrity Apprentice. You could just see it. There's not a person on earth right now that's not affected by this. Everybody knows somebody somewhere. And the opiate epidemic, like I said, is worse than ever. Almost everybody knows somebody suffering from that too. So you got to pay attention. You better pay attention now, because I don't care who it is. Nobody's off the table. And it's a conversation that needs to be continued and carried on. And with this pandemic, a lot of weekend warriors are now full-blown addicts and alcoholics. I can guarantee you that we're hitting numbers at record highs that have never been seen before. Fear, anxiety, underlining, issues that were never addressed. All that stuff's coming to the surface during a time like this.
Yeah, no, I believe it. And unfortunately, I've been hearing a lot of that too. And, man, I hope that this shift that I believe, and I think you just said you agree with, is starting to happen. I hope that it just,
Yep.
I hope that it continues. So before we wrap up, Darren, I'd like to ask if there's one piece of advice that you feel like you'd like to share with the sober nation.
Yeah, I just try to tell people, even though we're sober, that it doesn't mean life is smooth sailing. And if you are ever in that moment where you're not on that spiritual beam, just take yourself back to that last day, because that's what I do a lot. And it reminds me, it ain't worth it, because the worst day I've had in recovery, when you get to that place where you could say it's better than the best day I ever had, high and drunk, the most amazing feeling in the world. When you can get that inner peace. I said it to Brandon Novak last week. We spoke for an hour alone on the phone after we did our last IG live. And I go, bro, when you find this feeling of inner peace, I could lose everything tomorrow. I can wind up in a little shoebox apartment and know that I found me and be so good with it and say, at least I lived the life. I had the opportunity. He goes, bro, he goes, I'm right there with you. It's just, we all got to fight to get to that place. But even when you get there, you got to fight to stay there because, like I said, right now I'm all good. In 3-4 hours, I could be out there. But I know what to do now to reel myself back in. I got all the tools I need. And that's amazing. And I think a lot of times we're not responsible for our own thoughts, but we are responsible for how long we want to think those thoughts. And we have the tools to get out of our own way, work with other people, not just in and out of recovery, people that are suffering, be a better person by saying what you mean, meaning what you say, and not saying mean. Just little things you can do to just get to that higher spiritual self. So
That's
with
awesome.
that, we can end it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice, man. So you can learn more about Darren, his speaking engagements, his book, Aiming High, by visiting officialdarrenprince.com. Thanks again for coming on the show with me today, Darren.
Thanks, bro. We'll talk soon.
Be sure to check out the show notes for all the info from today's episode. Sober Nation FM is brought to you by Sobriety Engine. Sobriety Engine is a free online community of men and women supporting each other in their recovery. Visit sobrietyengine.com to join today. This show is also brought to you by Recover Health. If you're ready to get fit and start living a healthier lifestyle while supporting your sobriety, you can learn more about having me as your own personal fitness and nutrition coach at rcvrhealth.com. And again, whether you're listening to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or watching on YouTube, please share this with your friends, follow, subscribe, and leave us a review. Nation, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.